The engineer's hands were shaking. Larry Tesler sat at his computer in Palo Alto, California, December 1979, about to give the demonstration his bosses ordered, and his colleagues begged him not to. Standing behind him, a 24-year-old in jeans and a black turtleneck watched the screen like a man seeing fire for the first time. Steve Jobs started screaming. "You're sitting on a gold mine." The technology on that screen was 6 years old. Xerox had built the entire future of computing and was about to hand it away for a stock certificate worth $1 million. 9 years before that fateful demo, Xerox was untouchable. Their photocopiers dominated every office in America, printing money almost as fast as they printed documents. Chief scientist Jack Goldman had a vision: convince Xerox leadership to fund a research center unlike anything corporate America had ever seen. He chose Palo Alto, California, 3,000 miles from headquarters in Stamford, Connecticut. The mandate was breathtaking in its ambition: invent the office of the future. Goldman recruited the most brilliant computer scientists in the country, offered them lavish salaries, and gave them one instruction: dream without limits. What they built in just 3 years defies belief. By 1973, the team at PARC had completed the Xerox Alto, the world's first personal computer with a graphical user interface. Windows, icons, folders, a mouse that let you point and click. 11 years before the Macintosh. But the Alto was just the beginning. Bob Metcalfe invented Ethernet that same year, the technology that connects every computer network on Earth today. Gary Starkweather had already built the laser printer in 1971. They created WYSIWYG text editing. What you see on screen is what prints on paper. Every piece of the modern computing puzzle, assembled under one roof, a full decade before anyone else even knew the puzzle existed. 3,000 miles away, Xerox executives sat in wood-paneled boardrooms in Connecticut. They understood copier toner, paper supply chains, and maintenance contracts. When PARC researchers flew east to demonstrate what they'd built, management saw curiosity: an expensive science project with no obvious revenue model. The Alto wasn't a copier. It didn't sell toner. It didn't fit a single line item in Xerox's business plan. So the greatest inventions of the 20th century sat on desks inside PARC, used by researchers to send each other emails and edit documents, while the executives who paid for all of it had no idea what they were sitting on. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Steve Jobs, co-founder of a scrappy little startup called Apple Computer, made Xerox an offer. Let his engineers tour PARC. Let them see everything. And in exchange, Xerox could buy 100,000 shares of Apple stock before its initial public offering. $10 a share. $1 million total. The executives in Connecticut didn't hesitate. $1 million stake in Silicon Valley's hottest startup? Easy money. They approved the deal immediately, without consulting a single researcher in Palo Alto. When word reached Palo Alto that outsiders were coming, the reaction was immediate. PARC engineers were furious. They understood exactly what they'd built, even if the suits in Connecticut didn't. Some openly protested. They argued, pleaded, warned management that showing this technology to a competitor was insanity. But the order came from 3,000 miles away, and it was final. The demonstration would proceed. The engineer chosen to give the presentation was a soft-spoken researcher named Larry Tesler. He had no idea that what he was about to show would change the course of technology and end his career at Xerox forever. On a December morning in 1979, Steve Jobs and his team arrived at Coyote Hill Road. Larry Tesler sat down at the Alto and began the demonstration. He moved a cursor across the screen with the mouse. He opened windows that overlapped like sheets of paper on a desk. He clicked on icons. He selected text and dragged it from one place to another. Jobs couldn't contain himself. He jumped out of his chair, pacing behind Tesler, waving his arms. "You're sitting on a gold mine," he shouted. "Why isn't Xerox doing anything with this?" Stanford University would later call it the closest thing in computing history to the Prometheus myth, fire stolen from the gods. Years later, Jobs revealed something telling. Xerox showed him 3 revolutionary technologies that day: the graphical user interface, Ethernet networking, and object-oriented programming. But he was so mesmerized by the GUI that he barely registered the other 2. "I was so blinded by the first one, I didn't even really see the other 2, he admitted. But Jobs didn't simply steal what he saw. Apple's engineers went back to Cupertino and built the Lisa and Macintosh from scratch, not copying the Alto, but reimagining its concepts for a machine ordinary people could afford. Jobs saw the commercial potential that an entire building full of geniuses couldn't unlock. The first person to walk out the door was the one who mattered most. Larry Tesler, the very researcher who gave Steve Jobs the demonstration, quit Xerox in 1980. The reason? Sheer frustration. Years of watching management ignore everything PARC had created. He joined Apple, bringing with him an intimate knowledge of graphical interface design that would prove invaluable. But Tesler wasn't alone. Bob Metcalfe, the inventor of Ethernet, had already left to found 3Com, a company built entirely on technology Xerox refused to sell. The bleeding had begun, and once it started, it never stopped. Xerox finally woke up, or tried to. 2 years after Jobs' visit, they launched the Xerox Star 8010. Their own commercial version of the Alto's concepts. Sleek, powerful, and completely, catastrophically unaffordable. A full office system, workstations, file server, and laser printer cost up to $100,000. That's $350,000 in today's money. For context, you could buy a house for that price. Over its entire production run, the Xerox Star sold roughly 25,000 units. A technological masterpiece that almost nobody could buy. January 24, 1984. Steve Jobs stood on a stage in Cupertino and pulled a beige computer from a bag. The crowd gasped. A synthesized voice spoke from the machine. "Hello? I am Macintosh." The price tag? $2,495. 1/40th the cost of a Xerox Star office system. The graphical interface that Xerox built but couldn't sell was suddenly in the hands of everyday people. The personal computer revolution had officially begun. And Xerox's name was nowhere on it. Not on the box. Not in the credits. Not in the history books that were already being written. Apple wasn't the only empire built from Xerox's blueprints. Charles Simonyi walked out of PARC in 1981 and went straight to Microsoft, carrying the concepts behind WYSIWYG editing. He became the chief architect of Microsoft Word, the word processor that would dominate global business for decades. Other PARC alumni helped build Adobe Systems, the company behind Photoshop and PDF. Others founded or shaped Sun Microsystems. The PARC Diaspora, that's what historians call it, seeded virtually every major technology company of the next 30 years. Xerox didn't just lose a product. They lost an entire generation of visionaries who built the modern digital world. Somewhere else. For someone else. And then there's the stock. Remember that deal, 100,000 shares of Apple at $10 each? When Apple went public on December 12, 1980, Xerox's $1 million investment was instantly worth $16 million. A nice return. But Xerox sold. They took their profit and walked away. Had they held those shares through the decades of stock splits and Apple's meteoric rise, through the iPod, the iPhone, the most valuable company on earth, those original 100,000 shares would be worth over $1.2 billion today. Xerox traded the entire computer revolution for a stock certificate. And even that stock certificate was worth a fortune they couldn't hold on to. The numbers tell the final story. At its peak in 1999, Xerox generated $18 billion in annual revenue, still mostly from copiers and printers. The digital future they invented was generating trillions for everyone else. By 2020, Xerox's revenue had withered to $7.2 billion. Meanwhile, Apple, the company that walked into PARC as a scrappy startup, crossed $2 trillion in market value. The laser printer remains the only major PARC invention that Xerox successfully brought to market. The GUI, the mouse, Ethernet, WYSIWYG editing. All of it became someone else's fortune. The tragedy of Xerox isn't that they failed to innovate. They were arguably the greatest innovation laboratory in human history. Every piece of technology you use today traces a direct line back to a concrete building on Coyote Hill Road. The tragedy is that invention without execution is just a museum exhibit. PARC proved that building the future isn't enough. You have to be willing to destroy your own business model to bring it to market. Xerox couldn't cannibalize their copier empire for an uncertain digital future. Steve Jobs had no empire to protect. He had nothing to lose and everything to build. Every time you click a mouse, drag a window across your screen, or print a document from across the room, you're using technology born inside Xerox PARC more than 50 years ago. The company that invented the future couldn't see it. The people who could see it walked out the door and built it for someone else. If this story changed how you think about innovation, about the difference between creating the future and actually owning it, subscribe. Because every week, we uncover the rise and ruin of companies that changed the world.